Hello everyone and welcome back to Cities Skylines, where we get to try to lay out some new elements for the first little town here that's kind of just at the entrance, and this is going to be our springboard off into the rest of the area, but I want to cover a lot of bases here at the initial start. So what I'm doing is roughly laying out a new set of roads. This took a couple tries. Road networks and getting a cool kind of balanced look is definitely not my strong suit. So it does take me longer than I would want, and I do have some trouble just coming up with shapes and things. And you know, as this series progresses, hopefully we can kind of fix that and make some pretty cool stuff. So what I'm doing now, though, is I am drawing little boxes that are going to represent where the fields are going to be going. This episode is all about farming. We're not going to get this 100% done, but we will get enough done to show you what I'm going for. And then also we will get enough done to where I can probably finish it off camera, so we can move on to a new section for the 4th episode. So hopefully you guys like this little setup that we have here, and I'm going with really small farm plots. Locally owned kind of areas are kind of like this in my mind. You know, I grew up in a really small town in West Virginia, and it's a little reminiscent of this. And also, I am getting some inspiration from, say, Japan and things like that, and how they lay out their farms. Now, I am doing this a little inefficiently on purpose because I want to have a good shape variety and making it look kind of haphazardly thrown together. It is a look that I kind of like, and it kind of makes the edge of the town seem broken up and more blending into the environment around. So that's why we are spreading these out. We're not doing this massive like European grid system that you might see. So this is a little bit different than what I think most people would do in Cities Skylines, and hopefully you guys like this. We are using different kind of farm decals here for the base of a lot of these farms. These are going to be semi-functionally. I do have some assets that do provide farm-like products out into the city, so we will be plopping those down, and other small industrial buildings just to provide more jobs. But now that we have the rough fields kind of laid, we'll go ahead and use some really small shrubs and the line tool to simply draw out some of these fields. Here initially, you know, still trying to get used to using these separate mods and tools all at once, you know, and this is kind of the problem when you kind of jump into a game that you never really had a whole lot of experience in. You're going to run into elements of inefficiencies and also times where you get a little lost in just the tools themselves, but that'll clear up as the series progresses and we progress into cooler and newer things. So at this point, I realized that I can use the Move It tool to just copy assets rather than having to draw each line, and then we can actually pre-draw the first line to the exact length of each field, and then we will copy and move it into position as we go. This is a little bit of a faster solution than hand drawing it all every time. And since every one of my fields are slightly longer, shorter, and slightly wider or more narrow, it is just a better way to try and keep these uniform rather than trying to hodgepodge multiple fields together, and we can get a decent effect most of the time. We're gonna leave some of these fields blank. You know, you're not gonna grow crops 100% of the time on 100% of your fields, but also it just kind of breaks up the monotony of things. I first wanted to try and possibly make it look overgrown. That's what I'm going to attempt here real quick. There's a lot of trial and error when it comes to these things, so you know, I'm just kind of placing some weeds in the rough shape of what could have been its old plow lines, then filling in some thicker grass elements, and then some dirt patches around just to make it look a little roughed up. It looks okay. You can do this. In fact, if I was like building around a heavy industrial area, something with heavy pollution, I might do something like that, similar to kind of blend that outwards and make that look heavily polluted and barren. But I think for farms, not so much. It's just not quite working out for us. I do run into a little bit of a problem, by the way, and I'm hoping you guys might be able to help me with it. I have these brushes, and these brushes allow me to slap down large textures on without interfering with the roads. That's the problem with Surface Painter tool, and whenever I use this function, it goes from 60 FPS to 5 FPS. And as soon as I close the window and stop trying to place these items, it completely goes back to normal. I don't know what's causing that. I don't know if that's necessarily the mod, or the mod might be clashing with something else that I have installed. Who knows? If anyone else is experiencing the same thing, do let me know, and I would like to maybe hear some solutions. Other than that, we now have these farm sheds kind of placed around and some additional silos, because we do want to have some slight industrial areas in these sections. So we're going to be mixing some concrete around, and the main inspiration for an area such as this is probably something similar to Farming Sim, maybe even Trucking Sim, American Trucking Sim, or your Trucking Sim, and it's very reminiscent of the little depots you might have around the map, and you drop your cargo off here as well. So I'm just trying out different assets together to make it look, you know, very country, very farm. We do have some fuel out here, you know, maybe some kerosene that they do keep out to either keep things warm, or possibly just fuel for all the equipment that they use to harvest all these fields. Now, the reason I'm keeping these small fields is because each, I guess, family or small company is going to have a bundle of them, and then they have this little compound that they own as kind of a home base like mindset. And it does look pretty cool to have these, you know, little fences, and then you can start bunching up shrubbery near the edges of it, so you can make areas look overgrown. And, you know, worst case scenario, if you don't like an area, try just covering some shrubs in there and see how it looks, because shrubbery does wonders for detailing out. And this is going to be a pretty cool spot. You know, we can texture in some different elements. We're going to use some custom line decals to make this look like a stamped kind of large concrete surface rather than one single pour. That's not probably the best way they would do that. So each one of those little grids would probably be its own separate pour, so they have enough time to spread it out before it partially hardens and things like that. At that point, we'll have a little loading zone in the back, still messing with some details. I don't really like the color of my dirt roads. They look very much like sand, which is okay, but I wouldn't mind something a little bit more dark and muddy, and so we do have all these mud decals, so I'm trying to work this in. It becomes really busy though, and not quite working out, which is kind of a shame. I think I just overused it in some areas, so I'm going to try and tone it down a little bit, possibly only use it in certain areas so that it's just not this gray blob. You just can't see what's going on there, and from an artist standpoint, that's just not a good way to display something. So I go back in, delete a lot of that, and just leave some rough patches, and that's what we're going to try and capture throughout all these areas, especially areas where there's a lot of tractors around these compounds going in and out and around. And since all these roads technically do function, you will see people driving on them here and there, at least near the compound areas, and it does provide a little bit of that movement that you kind of want to see throughout this whole section. So this is kind of the first large compound. I spent a lot of time here. Usually the first structure takes the most time, simply because it's your establishing shot, and you use it as a base to kind of base your other similar structures off of for the rest of the episode. So you can see we're really trying to fill in the gaps in between the roads with a heavy, dense shrubbery, and then spotting it with some trees to provide a little bit of verticality, not a crazy amount. We do prefer to keep low bushes here for a couple of reasons. You know, you don't want traffic to have to try and see something through something very tall. It's actually better to keep them low so they can actually see traffic left to the right. And then in the middle sections where there's not much need to see that traffic, you can have some taller elements. So here is a bit of a different section. So we have a much longer kind of storage industrial shed there, and we are just trying to make it look a little bit interesting. And it's pretty cool to have such a big building that has a heavy footprint with all these other small utilitarian-esque areas, and I think it just provides a nice little change in pace around the whole area in general. We'll add some of this this wall, that's sheet metal wall kind of fence area. It's a pretty cool fence to have, especially for such a heavy industrial / storage zone. You know, you want people to not be able to really see what's inside, so they're not quite as tempted to poke their head in per se and take from you, because they just don't know what's there, and then the risk involved in scouting it out becomes greater. You know, it's just little deterrents like that that do matter. We can have some utility trucks. We can have some fuel trucks in here. Checking to see if there's any other vehicles that we might be able to pop around. We do add some forklifts, a little bit of a shed somewhere, and some vans. Vans are pretty handy and a nice space filler in my mind, because vans and work trucks, they get used a lot in these areas. Here we have some spotted concrete in these areas between these two fields. Decided to just make a nice, simple, small fuel storage tank, and then some either fertilizer or some other liquid. It could be pesticides held up in these 3 containers. I don't know, but it just looks pretty cool dividing these 2 fields. It's providing that little vertical element in between them and just breaking it kind of naturally. I am also trying to mess again with the surface painter tool a little bit. I'm trying to delete the rough surface, the light surface, I guess you could say, of the roadways here, so I can try and maybe just dull them down a little bit, because they just look really bright, and it didn't really work. The surface painting tool is not very smooth. It's not good at smoothing areas, and so the roads and things become really broken and jarring, and sadly it's just not going to work out for me, it seems, which is a bit of a shame, but that's okay, because we can just throw in the rest of the detail, and that is around, mark out a little bit of a loading zone, which is just long enough for 2 little vans, some cargo tucked in here and there, and you can have some tractors underneath shown sheds as well. We'll also then, it's actually kind of funny, when I did test this out a bit ago with some people moving into a small just test settlement, you know, people coming in to this area in like Lamborghinis to work at a farm. I don't know many farmers that would bring their Lamborghini, if they do own one, down a dirt road, but apparently in Cities Skylines it's a common thing to do. I don't know why they do it, but they just do. Kind of wish the vehicle they drove was a little bit more reminiscent of where they worked. I would like to see a lot of trucks in this area. The decal of broken up concrete is really great for those hard edges that you kind of want to blend into that dirt road. And at this point, we're just going to be working on shrubbery and adding some new blending areas. You know, heavy, dense, low shrubs mixed into some vertical shrubs, and we get to add some texture and then start blending that out even more. Using short tufts of grass just to make it look like it needs mowed here, and then a few rocks, very similar to Planet Coaster, what we do here, and you just get a nice kind of beautiful effect. So let's take a look at real time, and you guys can give me some feedback. Okay, so here we are overlooking a bit of this farming area that we built on camera, and it is going pretty well. It's going to be a nice blending of the industrial plastics factory that you see a little bit in the background and the town that you see a little bit to the right. Now, 100% of that town is just placeholder, just so I can kind of see what traffic is doing on these roads over here. But it's pretty cool to have these unmarked paved roads, which is very common in small towns or just in the country in general. I mean, they are 2-lane roads, but they're just don't have that center line because, hey, just pass when you need to, essentially. And we have some pretty cool little farming outposts, and they control little plots of land, kind of just in the immediate area of them. And you can see we do have moving tractors here carrying cargo to and from these large kind of barns, which do act as the agricultural production of our town. So they do work, which is pretty cool to see. And having these kind of partially sometimes on dirt paths and sometimes just always connected to the concrete roads means that you do get movement in this area, which is something that I really wanted to see. I also did download a fertilizer truck, which looks pretty cool driving around. It's another little farming asset, and I just like the variety that you can get. So we can get little tractors, we can get fertilizer trucks, and then a few semis that do go over into this area, a little bit over here, and they provide just that little extra industrial that we might need. So eventually a lot of these fields and roads are going to look kind of similar to this. You get Z fighting with decals, but that's really unavoidable with pretty much any game that lets you be creative in a sense. So Z fighting is an issue, but you just kind of get used to it. We get this is kind of my favorite industrial zone. This is the one that we built on camera, and it just looks pretty complete. We have a barn, we have a little bit of a shed out over there. This is actually providing a little bit of a electricity connection point, and we have some covered sheds for our tractors. We get fertilizer piles, sandbags, things like that, some silos for storage, an open top little dump truck type of thing there, loading zone. And it just overall, I think, feels pretty good to look at. You can see how dense the grass and shrubs that we are going for is. And I think over time, this is just going to look pretty cool, especially with somewhat of a crop-like effect. I know this is basically just grass, but from a distance, most people really only play Cities Skylines like this. And it's looking pretty good. This is a more large distribution center, so it's just a big hangar-like element with a lot of little cargo crates and things, and a little bit of a dispensary detached, so they can kind of load up here and just keep things stored inside this section. It also has, well, I guess a truck pulling out. Goodbye. Have a good, safe trip. It also has one of those utility sheds. I'm using it kind of as a fake front door. Someone parked their scooter over here. That looks pretty nice. We have combine harvesters as well, which is pretty cool. Kind of wish there was just more farming assets in general, but I'm still looking and gathering some. This is the final little area that we built on camera, and this is just a smaller version of basically the two combined. So we have some towers for like fertilizer, what have you, pesticides maybe, a little fuel container, a very confused tractor going around as they do, a little bit of a warehouse area, and some back area as well with some tractors, some vans, and some side parking and things like that. This is probably one of my favorite greenery elements so far because we get some rocks kind of showing through, and all these elements where you get these bushes kind of bumping up to the side of the road just look great. Makes me think of Europe a little bit, and just, in my opinion, looks very beautiful. We do have a few other things to do. I have to do this little plant over here and then up here. But once that's done, this whole kind of green space will be complete. we'll start moving either into the town next episode. That's up to you guys. Do let me know in the comments down below if you want me to move into the town, or I should start growing up from the industrial district, because there should be some stuff up through here, like little spotty industrial spots, just for job's sake. But it'll help try and blend this lightly into the town a little bit more. And then this is kind of the main central town, the main street with what will end up being, I guess, the main services, and we might even have some more smaller farms up here, depending if we think that might be too much. So, currently, I think that's it for this episode of Cities Skylines. If you guys are enjoying this stuff, feel free to leave a like, leave a comment down below on what you guys think I should build next, and also, don't forget to subscribe. So until then, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.